Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
And that's what I mean about the dragon, the fear dragon. Because honestly, when I'm faced with a completely unknown, brand new piece of Latin, it's like, oh my goodness, I've got to focus, I've got to think. And our kids are that way. And of course, we give them, one paragraph and they're freaked out. One thing I love about a reading-based text is you teach them from the very beginning that, oh, it's a paragraph of Latin. It has meaning. We can do this. And that's one reason I like that. Like that being faced with a passage. Because you're saying, yes, there's vocab. Yes, there's all the other things you've talked about. But ultimately, what we're talking about is a story, is meaning. And you will be learning about another culture from the inside. Now, if we think about all the different options, and I've teased the list of 5 out a little bit, you have all these sorts of things going on in the room. And obviously, the one we're talking about today is how do you enable students to get the vocabulary into their heads. Now, I will say this, if you're teaching middle school, it's all a lost cause. I always think middle school is at which I started teaching it. And I absolutely love them, but I always think that's an oxymoron. Middle and school don't go together. But anyway, apart from that, how do you get vocabulary into their heads? Well, that obviously is relevant because what tends to happen, and we'll see this in an example a little bit further on, students absolutely cannot believe that particularly noun endings change, and that puellae can mean girls, but it can also mean girls apostrophe s, or of the girl. And so in order to manage vocabulary, you actually have to pay attention to endings as well, and that is a huge challenge. You need to pronounce it properly. If a student sees a word, they're likely not to read it the way it's actually pronounced unless they've heard it pronounced. I get this because right now, because I'm teaching online, and occasionally I'll have phone conversations with my students, and they'll say, I don't understand the ablative. And I'm like, okay, do I tell you, sweetheart, that it's ablative? What do I do? And so we take for granted that students will read the Latin and pronounce it correctly, and actually will pronounce it the same way every time, because if they don't pronounce it the same way every time, they're not going to recognize it necessarily as the same word. And the other thing that I think is all part of this memorizing the vocabulary is that, yes, it's true, you can have a list of 10, the 10 most important verbs. And I think that's a great list to have, or 20 most important verbs. But in the end, you meet them in sentences. And so to teach students that this word is going to be in a sentence that makes sense. How often have you heard students say, it doesn't make sense? If you can teach them, yeah, it's going to make sense, then they'll have a fighting chance, I think, of making sense of it, rather than just thinking, oh, if I translate word for word, this is what she wants. And there we are, translate accurately. You meet a word on one occasion and it will be translated in a certain way, but in another sentence it might be slightly different. Or you need to deal with tense, or whatever it is. So all of those things, I think, tie in with vocabulary, and just learning a list of words won't work. And as we know, it doesn't work. And the students get frustrated with that because they wish it would. Now, let's talk about how much time to give to and I also want to talk a little bit about ways to address it so that you're not just, as I say, being a classroom, a sort of dictionary classroom where it's like, oh, here, turn to the letter B and we'll do a whole lot of words. So I've mentioned the importance of pronunciation. Pre-reading is useful before a passage because that's when you can focus on vocabulary issues. We'll talk a little bit about using it predictively. And of course, another thing that you can do in pre-reading is talk about derivatives. And this would be a good time to mention that in your in the section to the right that has handouts. There are 2 documents which are on the Ekaramani Teacher Companion site with an activity for every single chapter that addresses vocabulary by looking at derivatives. And I'll show you a little bit of one of those on a slide. And then the other question, when you're trying to address vocabulary, is what if you get a sentence that you don't completely understand, which of course is very common. And one of the big, obviously, this new word, well, not a new word at all, but this new phrase that comes up a lot now, and it's a great one, comprehensible input. Obviously, we want what we put in front of our students to be comprehensible. However, I'm not a believer in limiting the words to a very small number, because I think that big picture, we need to remind our students that the horizons are wide. We also know that in Latin, the level of authentic Latin that's available is very high level stuff. We're talking, you know, intermediate, high, advanced, low, and beyond when we get to AP. And so we want students' reading ability to be that high in 3 or 4 years. And for that reason, I think we need to focus on reading, because that's our goal. But also, it does mean, it seems to me, that we owe it to our students and to the person who's going to be teaching on Latin 2 or Latin 3, if they continue on, we owe it to them to introduce students to a wide number of words and help them to manage the words that they can't immediately get when they meet a new passage. I don't know whether you use Ekaramani or not, but one of the features that on our e-text is the vocabulary. There's a vocabulary list under each story, as I'm sure as there are in most stories, and they're read aloud, and the students are able to put their own, repeat the word after what's been said. The voice of this guy who does it is the most amazing voice. I'm sure he's a tenor. And I'm just going to let you listen. My students used to love to imitate him.
Nonus.
And then the students say nonus, and then he says it.
Sextum taedebat.
Sextum taedebat.
Sextum taedebat.
And that's so kids can compare.
Apereo aperire.
Apereo aperire. And notice that he doesn't give the meanings. We're talking about sound.
Pilla, pillai.
And notice that he doesn't mention that it's feminine.
Pilla, pillai. Visna. Visna. Ludo, ludera.
And so forth.
Ludo, ludera.
You'll see in this list that some words are bolded and some aren't. And the idea is that the words that are bolded are the words that you probably will meet again. The other ones are either glosses or words that you will not really meet again. And so that's a way of reducing the pressure a little bit. So a few of those words, they say, look, you'll never meet them again, don't worry about it, but they're there to help you. And I think that's a useful way to deal with it. And sometimes I would even tell my students, look, actually, you really don't need, I don't know, here probably I would say you need to know them all, but or pay attention to them all. But in other settings, I would say, no, you don't need to. So that's what I was talking about, learning to match the sound on a consistent basis to the spelling, so that when they hear it, when they see it, when they read it silently, which most students do, there's definitely time to read aloud, and we should, but they're at home, they're in the classroom, they're not reading out loud, but they're seeing that this is the word aperio and relating it to mean open. Now, pre-reading again. So here's the passage, oh panic. It's however many paragraphs. Students are like, oh goodness, now what? Well, there are several things you can do to prepare for the reading. One of the things you can do is simply skim through it and say, okay, who's in the story? and get students to dig through the text and, oh, well, look here, there's Marcus. Oh, there's Sextus. There's Mother. What's her name? And so go through and skim it, and you're instantly dealing with the text. You could even ask, where are they? There are lots of questions you can do to say, let's look at the Latin and respond in English. What do you see there? Another thing you can do is look at the vocabulary and say, okay, if we have a perio here, what do you think is being opened? What's going on? If you have a ball, what do you expect is going to happen? Oh, look, there's Ludo in here, so obviously somebody's playing with the ball. If we look at excipio, there are 3 possible meanings. Which do you think is the most likely to be used in this context? And you would hope that somebody would say, how about cat? And then, you know, why? Well, because we're talking about a ball. So again, paying attention to the vocabulary, but in the context of what's going to happen with it. So you're instantly tagging the Latin word with a context. Another thing you can do is keep the vocabulary out and look at the picture and then tie the 2 things together. In addition to having audio of the vocabulary, there's audio of the story. And I remember when this was introduced and thinking, oh, my students won't understand this at all. And it fascinated me because some students got it almost immediately. It was astonishing. I didn't. I had to train myself to listen and listen for meaning and hear the whole story. But some students will actually respond extremely well to this. The other thing that I love about having the story is that you can hear different voices. So your students hear voices other than yours. I'll play this a little bit to get this across. And again, this is talking about, let's hear these words pronounced. Let's assume they mean things. Will your students understand everything? No. But now, if we had done all those things we've just talked about, this would be a 3rd time you'd be looking at some of this vocabulary.
Chapter 16, Story. Listen and follow along as the story from Chapter 16 is read aloud. Why is Sextus a pest?
Jam nona hora erat. Ad hoc immobilis in fossa haerebat raida. Sed nihil facere sextum caedebat, nam puer strenuus erat. Subito igitur, ad raidam currit et cistam aperet. Tum e cista pillam extrahit.
Misle pilla ludere Marke?
Clamat, pillam ad Marcum statim jacet. Marcus eam excipit, et ad sextum mittit. Identerem pueri pillam jaciebant alter ad alterum. Tum sextus, qui semper Corneliam vexare vult, per iocum pillam jacet et Corneliam ferit. State mirata, Cornelia ad matrem se vertit.
Cur me semper vexat Sextus Mater? Cur pillam in me jacet? Quam molestus puer est Sextus?
And if you know that story, you'll see that a lot of it is recycled. Cur me semper vexat Sextus. We know he's an aggravating boy. So the key, I think, with managing vocabulary is to introduce new vocabulary, but try to recycle earlier vocabulary. There's always more than you wish there was, but I think it's the only way to move forward, particularly if you have a really narrow range of vocabulary. It can be very boring. Here's one of these pre-reading activities that you can download, and you're asking students to look at the vocabulary list and say, what is the vocabulary word from which these words come? I was fascinated that noon comes from nones, because after all, the 9th hour would be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but for some reason, noon does come from that, and I can't tell you any more than that, unless, I guess if you were in the far north of Scotland, you'd have been up for 9 hours from dawn. But anyway, tedious. Notice the change in spelling. Notice that aper ends up with a T in it. We know that it does because of the other principal parts which haven't been given at this point. The French word for pill is pilule. P-I-L-U-L-E, and it's a literally means a little ball. And then I think these words from Ludo are fascinating. That it's ludicrous. You're playing with me, aren't you? So quite a nice series of activities, and there's one for every chapter that you can download. And oh yes, I circle this one just because finding the root in the middle of a word is a skill that we tend to take for granted, but it's a useful one to have. So if students can begin to identify those roots in the middle, then they can start saying, wait a minute, wonder what that root is telling me, and in the context they might be able to guess at the meaning of the word. And talk about guessing. Immobilis, well, you can guess that one. In fossa, every Latin student who uses ecce romani knows what a fossa is, and you know the raida is there, but you might not remember what harebat meant. Again, once one has the four principal parts, you have hysi, and an adhesive clearly comes from that. Of course, adhere comes from it too. And so they might, a way to get at meaning by thinking both the context. So it's in the ditch. What's it doing there? Well, what does adhesive do? It sticks. Okay, so this is connected, so it's stuck in the ditch. Again, with extrahit, again, if you know the four principal parts, you can get to extract and pulling something out. Yakit. You could do this. You could get this one both by definition, or by derivatives, but also by what is somebody likely to do with a pila? Well, if we go to the next word, excipit, you've got somebody who the ball, somebody yakit, pila, and somebody else excipit, pila. And so one of those means throw, and one of those means catch it, and you could guess at that. And the excipio, the CIP, is not unrelated to CAP, as in capture. And you can talk about at some point, and you no doubt will, about how vowels change once there's a prefix. And then mitit is nice because it's a synonym for yakit. And this is a useful concept. See if you can find synonyms for words, which of course you can't in the early stages because you haven't had enough words, but big picture is quite useful. Pariokum, a reminder that an I and a J, that Latin doesn't have a J. If you change that I to a J, you can potentially get to the meaning. And again, in the context, we know that sexist is trying to be annoying. So you have a clue from the meaning, not just from the spelling, that it could mean that he's playing a trick on her. Again, we've got yakit, and then we've got ferit, and there's absolutely, I can't think of a derivative that comes from ferit. Maybe there is one. So if he's playing a joke and he throws a ball, what does he do? And again, you can unpack that, and instead of kids running to the back of the book or clicking on their iPads or whatever, if they've got an online dictionary or something, what are your options? Because as a sentence goes on and you're beginning to unfold the meaning, you narrow down the options. And this, by the way, this is a plug for reading from left to right. If you jump to the verb, you may well have problems if you don't know what it means. And particularly if you decide it means something that it doesn't, like supposing you thought it meant carry, then you'd have a real problem. One of the neat things about having a smartphone and having online dictionaries is that you can look at derivatives very easily and train students to look at the origin. And that's a terrific help. I remember when I had a whole set of great big dictionaries in my room just for this, and they're so cumbersome. It's much easier now. So that's educated guessing based both on the possibility of derivatives, but also on context. Now, I'm sure you all have some things that you do to address pre-reading and managing vocabulary at the beginning of a chapter or a unit. Wonder folks are writing things down. By the way, please feel free to write things down as we go, because I hope we can share them, because as I say, I know many of you have all sorts of ideas that I would love to learn.
And Caroline, this is Pamela. I'm going to interject here real quick, just because apparently there was some problem with, they didn't hear us at the beginning of the session. There was a problem with the audio.
Okay.
Oh dear, but yet they were still able to participate in our polls, etc. So I just wanted to then remind them that on that drop down where the little orange box is with the white arrow, besides which some of you have been using to let us know that we were actually having problems with our audio, but that you know that, Caroline, we have 5 handouts here. So right where the questions are, there's also another drop down that says handouts. And you can go ahead and click on each of those and download those directly to your laptop while we're anytime during this session, so that you can have them, laptop, iPad, etc., your device, you can have them readily available for you. And I don't have, people are being a little shy today, although Stephanie did she says, no, I am reading along. Thank you, Stephanie, for reading along with us. Please do not hesitate to share. I think we'll have Caroline continue on, but I'm here monitoring what you're saying, and we will definitely share more as we go along.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry about that, people, but that's just the joy of computers, isn't it? You never know whether they're really going to work. All right. Of course, we all want the instant resource to solve a vocabulary problem. And I mean, I find this all the time. If I read something that I'm not familiar with, I'm like, oh, there's a word here. Do I really have to look it up? And I have learned to try to live with that for as long as I possibly can. And only when I realize it's absolutely central to a sentence will I look it up. I try to apply some of the ideas that I've shared with you. So what do we do when, or what do we tell our students to do? What do we model for them while they're reading? Well, you know, there's always the back of the book, and you're always flipping to the back of the book. Or, of course, now people flip to Google. So I decided to try, to try this. Yes, okay. And I typed in Pilam yakit et puelam ferit, and yippee, we get a sentence back, except, of course, it's completely wrong because it has paid no attention to endings. What's even better, I'm not sure if this will work, but if it does, it's fun. Listen to the pronunciation. It's glorious. So that's made my day. I just think it's one of the funniest things. That you get entirely the wrong thing and then an absolutely marvelous Italian pronunciation, which doesn't really help us a whole lot. It doesn't reinforce our understanding of the words. So Google is, we can demonstrate to our students fairly easily, not going to work, especially with the sentence, and they are going to have to know the words. Okay, in this case, all they have to do is to look at the vocabulary underneath, and then in order to get the whole meaning of the sentence, they're going to have to look at the endings, which Mr. Google failed to do. Dictionaries, my favorite one is not a free dictionary, but it's on my iPhone, SPQR. It's a very neat dictionary, and it's helpful if you plug in a form, and then it'll almost always enable you to get to the dictionary entry. The downside of online dictionaries is that it's sort of in one eye and out the other. You can set up now a sentence by having notes attached to each word, which gives the meaning. I have a real problem with this. It's a marvelous security blanket for students, but my problem is that what you're encouraging them to do is to go, all right, if I just get the dictionary meaning of this word, I'm home dry. And as we proved earlier, you're not. Of course, the same principle is why I'm really opposed to interlinear documents, because if you write above the word, what is your student going to do when they read a sentence? They're going to read the English and not the Latin. So what I recommend is, if you have to look up words, write in the margin, and make yourself write things in the margin, never write them over the top. And then add notes in the margin. Oh, well, I suppose nearby glossary is actually looking at the nearby glossary that's given and then margin notes. And a very important comment that comes from, well, I think a lot of people say it, but if you're familiar with the work of Dexter Hoyos, who talks about reading Latin fluently, he helped with particularly with book 3 of Ecce. We've got to get students and ourselves to realize that Latin is a language on its own. It is not code for English. And the tendency is to think if we can put all the words into English, that we will then be able to manage the sentence. Well, no, the sentence can be managed and should be managed in Latin, and that's a trick that's time for another workshop. But it's an important principle to bear in mind. Student study options. Flashcards. Kids love flashcards. Although I had a student email me today and she said she's done flashcards and they simply don't work for her. I'll be honest, they don't work for me, but I know lots of students do. And what I used to do was to say, if you give me a complete set of flashcards before a test, I will give you 2 points if you've got a complete set of words plus word meanings, but I'll give you 3 points on the test, or maybe 4, I can't remember, if you have pictures. And the reason that pictures are nice is that the student has to process the words. So how, for example, are you going to process the translation? Are you going to draw a picture of Ferio? And
yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that. So we had some folks, Caroline Roberts, said, yes, that flashcards don't work for long-term language acquisition, is what he said. And then Amber shared with us that she says, I use gestures and read the Latin in phrases. And sometimes I add pictures on top of the Latin vocabulary words when possible.
Nice, nice. Yeah, good. Those are helpful. Those are great ideas. Yeah, keep them coming. The thing I do like about flashcards, if the students make them, is that they're investing time in them and thinking about it. Everybody knows Quizlet. Everything's there. There are lots of Quizlet type apps. I don't know if you're familiar with Memrise. I like this one more than Quizlet for several reasons. And some nice people have put all the words in there. So all you have to do is go there and Google Ecce Romani, and you will find that the words are in there. And you can see that I have another 499 words to learn because I haven't played with it. And I can set a daily goal. And what's sort of fun is that you can assign these to your students, and then they can see where they line up in terms of all the other people who have been playing on Memrise with the set of words that you've given them. And they get absolutely astronomical scores, which people enjoy, I think. And you can go and see what they've done. The thing that I like about Memrise is that you can, if you like, just do, quiz yourself, but you can also create your own cards, and you can create it by drawing and adding pictures. And so you're again processing it in terms of not just letters, but in terms of the concept. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, and Carrie shared with us, Carrie and Stephanie shared with us, but they shared you can also, on Quizlet, you can create animated flashcards for students to review on Quizlet.
Oh, wow. I haven't explored that. That's fabulous. Fun. Mm-hmm. Oh, good. Yeah, thank you. I very much liked pencil and paper, good old time composition book, and I would have students make a vocabulary list for each chapter and add derivatives. And also, if they found themselves looking up words as they went back through the chapter for some reason, that I wanted them to make a separate list of those words to make the point, oh, I had to look this up again, and write it down. And then I would check for those, because I think it's going back and realizing, oh, I didn't really know that word. that can be very helpful to nail. But again, it's the reading and rereading in context for long-term memory, as somebody said earlier, that I think it's important. And I think tying in the derivatives is a fabulous skill to develop with our students, you know, the comparison C. Assessment. Okay. How do we assess vocabulary? The traditional thing is absolutely to have a vocabulary list, go away, memorize it, people, and I will quiz you. Yeah, I think there's a place for that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Ideally, I think doing it in context is a better plan. However, it takes more work on our part. So lists have their place. In terms of what kinds of quizzes to give, what I have liked to do is to say, look, we have a new set of vocabulary this chapter because we've got fourth and fifth declension. Let's memorize all those together. What's useful about that is if you look at a word, oh gosh, I can't even think of a fourth declension word, manus. Unless you've really pinned it to your brain that it's fourth declension, you're going to think it's second declension. And so having those words in a group to attack with a quiz can be quite useful. Similarly, make sure you know the irregular verbs or unpredictable verbs. Third declension adjectives altogether can be a useful group. One thing that I always used to quiz my kids on is words that will predict indirect speech. So if you see dico, if you see puto, probably there will be indirect speech. And so it's useful to have that. And again, we're talking meaning, we're talking whole sentence, and not just individual words. However, quizzes are miserable. Oh, I've got a quiz today, I don't want to do this. So I always used to have a backup on a quiz. I used to have some students that would really prefer to do it orally, but also at the bottom of every quiz, I would have this little line. And if they hadn't studied, no biggie, just rewrite the words with the meanings times 5, bring it tomorrow and you'll get a 75. That means that the kid really hates memorizing vocabulary or honestly didn't have time, they don't get a 0. And then they actually have to work at recycling vocabulary. And then what they used to do was to cut this off, stick it on a whiteboard with tape, and then the next day they would take it off the whiteboard, give it to me, and stick it on their piece of work. And it seemed to work quite nicely. The other thing that I used to do on a test, you know, tests are nerve-wracking. And so you get to this passage that you have to translate or you have to deal with. And I would say, okay, I'll give you any 3 words. They liked that a lot for several reasons, not least because in the course of the semester or the year, they would realize, you know, I need to figure out which words are really important. And if they couldn't know what tum meant, and it was the first word in a sentence and it didn't seem to be somebody's name, they would just go, well, okay, I'll skip that. Maybe it's not important. And so learning to discriminate between what was important and what wasn't is a useful skill. And the other thing that I think, we have a lot of bright students in Latin, and they're used to making 100 on absolutely everything. And I'm here to tell you that we don't make 100 on almost anything ever in life, and that's okay. And if you're looking at a passage and you really only know 2/3 of the vocabulary, okay, so what are you going to do with that 2/3? You can do something with it because you have met that before. One thing I meant to mention, if when you introduce a passage, I saw this recently and I really liked it, have students highlight the words that they know. They might be surprised. There might be far more that they know than they think. And then there's something honestly magical about rereading a sentence. You read it, you go all the way through to the end, and you come back to the beginning. And as you reread and as you see the shape of the sentence, paying attention to clauses and commas and phrases and conjunctions, you see how it fits together and you begin to see what's going on. And that really is a good strategy. It works. So we can get rid of this fella, I hope, by telling kids it is okay if you don't have everything all the time. Now, in my AP class, I was vicious, and I got this idea from somebody else. I wasn't originally vicious, I suppose, but the idea was to take something in context and then ask for every single piece of information that they could possibly come up with on that item. And, you know, some of them could do this really well, some of them couldn't do it well. But at that point, you know, in AP, you really do need to know what options you have with a word. For example, quibus could be two different cases, and you need to know why. And so all the possible information you can possibly give on this. Some of my students did well, some of them didn't, and they knew it was grim, but it was something that as AP people, you need to be able to do. Also, another strategy with AP, when there is, of course, huge amounts of vocabulary, there are huge amounts of vocabulary, this, I'm pretty certain, comes with the Pearson Caesar. Words that in other words, in the vocabulary lists that are provided, or the glossaries that are provided on the page with different passages in Caesar, there are some of those words are asterisked, and those are the words that we know are high frequency, and so they're listed here for each set of paragraphs. And I found my students found that list to be very helpful, and I think I have posted that for you. I've also posted this for you, a way to address reviewing vocabulary and to put words in groups and to say, well, what do these three words have in common? You know, when you have a big vocabulary, you can really have some fun with synonyms. So, or putting things in groups, and that is also on the documents list. Now, again, how do you, I'm sure you've been writing down or thinking about things you do in your classroom to support students as they meet different words and deal with passages.
Yes, and so we had some folks share. So Carrie said, she said, my apologies, I meant I create her flashcards for review in class. Not sure if Quizlet has that capability. And she says she makes the cards that are something relatable to their age group. And then
Right.
Lisa shared that yes, and that our students need practice at rereading.
Lovely. Yep. Because we have this thing that, okay, you read it once, you've got it. No, you haven't. I mean, think how often you reread a sentence in any context in English. Yeah. So to remove the, I suppose, almost stigma. Yeah. Thank you.
And don't be shy. Absolutely share.
So that feeds nicely into this. Keep reading. Go back and reread earlier stories. And if you, again, use the Eke series, and if you've looked in the language activity books, there's a story, an additional story that goes with every chapter that's simpler, that recycles, and is kind of fun to read. And those are available. I think we didn't post them with this webinar, but they were in yesterday's webinar. We could add them if people wanted them.
Yeah, we had some other folks, Caroline, if you don't mind sharing. So Susan says that I finally had my students keep an index card of what I called frou-frou words, adverbs, conjunctions, words that they get stuck on. And then Robert,
brilliant.
Yes, brilliant. And then Robert shared that you can create scaffolded, certainly of passages or parallel stories to keep reading engaging and get more repetitions of target words or structures, which will increase the likelihood of a student acquiring meaning. And
absolutely, yeah.
And there certainly should be versions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. Lots of work to be done there, but if you've got the time to do it, that's terrific. Thinking a little bit of speaking as an extension. Different schools, different districts want more speaking than others, but again, processing the story by creating a little bit more. So a conversation between Marcus and the driver of the rider, for example, coming up with other ways to respond to the stories and to speak about them or to write about them. And so again, you're processing the vocabulary in a different way, and some kids particularly like to be creative with that. What I'm calling focused use of vocabulary. So, you know, in 45 minutes, you can see why I stressed the exclamation point on the end of the what to do with all that vocabulary and say that I'm not answering. But I hope we addressed some of these things and have given you things to take away. And you may have more questions. If you don't, I know that Pamela has to be.
Yes, and regarding AP Latin, there are already free scaffolded versions of every passage, which are a huge help to students. And Robert shared that. And then Lisa says, I have the students annotate as they read too.
Good. Yes, exactly. I think that's great. And you can annotate it in English or Latin, and that helps process what's there. Yep. Now I should hand over to you at this point, I think.
And I'm going to go ahead and show my screen, and then I'm going to check in to make sure that indeed you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
I can see the screen. I hope everybody can. I can see it.
Okay, great. So let me go ahead and share some things that we just wanted to make available to you. Gratis, which is a favorite word in world languages teachers' vocabulary. I always believe in free if we have it. And anyway, we do anyway at this point. So we did create a special course for you guys to be able to use to your heart's content. So if you do go to pearsonrealize.com and you use the username Eki Romani with the exclamation mark, and then the password Latin is alive with the exclamation mark, and those are case sensitive, by the way, you'll be able to get access to this demo course, which will be available through the end of December. So then when you actually go there, you'll see, once you log in, you'll see there, and you'll see that you can view all the 3 programs. So if you were to click on the programs, then there you have Eki levels 1, 2, and 3 for you to use. And now that it's on a brand new platform that offers a lot of wonderful features, I think you'll find whether it's discussion board type things for teacher created materials. We also have OpenEd in there that which is an integrated search engine, which has already over 800 Roman/Latin resources already in there that are already vetted for you as well, so you can be able to use those with these texts. You can add your own prompts and exercises and to there as well. So we'd love for you to be able to check that out. And then, we have these Latin readers that we have available. But I did want to share, because we are running right now, if you do need some, whether for your AP class or other readers, we do on these readers right now, if you use that code LAT18, you'd be able to receive 20% off of those readers. But I'm going to take you, so here's our Facebook page, because not everybody likes to access things the same way, but I'd love to invite you to join us on our Facebook, our Pearson World Languages Facebook page. And that is a closed group, but we'd love to have you join us. And I'm actually going to go ahead and take you live, because I think lots of times live can be more meaningful. So if you are so this is our Pearson World Languages Facebook group. And we post all kinds of things on here. Whether it's, oh my gosh, we found 75 Roman skeletons under a hotel swimming pool. In our students, we find, real world context, right, is important to them as well. So, my goodness, then we also had where we found the chariot, the horses with the chariots that were also Ancient chariot with horses and rider in tow just unearthed at an English construction site. But not just that, we have a ton of world languages research that's done out there by different people, also to encourage our students to continue to study the language and why they should do that, both for personal reasons and being part of a larger community, as well as, there's a lot of professional benefits that come as a result. But, whether I have subway maps of here, the Roman Empire according to, like the Roman infographic, the Roman Empire roads in transit map form, the Roman roads of Britain. We post all different kinds of things here to our World Languages Facebook page. So it is not just for Spanish, it's for all the Latin, Spanish, French, etc. Another great resource, so if you go to Pinterest.com, and you go pre-K Spanish World Teachers, but it actually is for World Languages Teachers, period. And again, we have whether, it was our Carpe Diem Professional Development Series that we did earlier in the year, or other Latin materials. We also post those on our Facebook page, so if you want to join us there as a follower, that'd be great. And then we've had a couple of questions. Whoops, something went wrong there. We had a couple of questions about where my internet is going down. Interesting. Can you see my screen now, Caroline? Hello, Caroline? Folks? My audio connection has been lost. Can you hear me now? Hello, folks. I don't know if you can hear me now. So
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Sorry. Apparently something's going on with the browser today. So if you were to go to pearsonschool.com and you want to find, so where do we find these recordings, right? So if you go pearsonschool.com and you go Ecce Romani, okay, this page will show up. And then if you go here and explore and you go under webinars, then right there we already have posted the Making the Most of the Story. And those are the live. And then on demand, we already have differentiation through process, Latin classroom, all those others. So those there, you can actually go ahead and click on those, listen to the recording. A number of those have embedded certificates of participation as well. So you can do that. But if you're wondering the other way to get to that, so if you go pearsonschool.com, and I don't know why it says I don't have my lovely internet, and you type in VCon, this page is going to pull up, and this will have, and if you scroll down here to our World Languages section, and then you will find both the live of which ones we still have to come, and then our on demand, which you can already see those that have been posted there, and like I said, you can access those. And we also have the Ecce Romani, if you're an Ecce Romani user, or you just want to, a lot of great free resources. Also that Ecce Romani Teacher Exchange Facebook page is a great resource for you. And we would love, here are different outlets for whichever venue is your preferred mode of reaching us. We'd love to have you. And then with that said, Caroline, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, we just thank you for reaching out to Latin teachers. It's we're very excited that Pearson has a lot to offer, and I hope people can benefit from all these things, which I'm sure they can.
And we're always only an email away. So if you did have
Very much so.
folks, if you did have other suggestions for sessions of things that are meaningful and relevant to you that you'd like for us to provide some professional development, please just reach out and email us. I'm at pamela.culbertson@pearson.com or caroline.kelly@pearson.com as well. And with that said, you guys have a great day, salve, and we will see you again soon.
Okay, well, later on, there's